We are going to move on to the next section of our workshop, which is the administrative report on town facilities. In your packet, you have a document which Coordinator Nugent created to help capture all of the information about our town properties, right? Like what properties does the town own and when did we buy them? And for what was the purpose? What was the thinking on them when we did that? He's going to present a PowerPoint presentation that will help walk us through that in a more comprehensive way. When he speaks to some of these documents that are referenced in the presentation, know that these documents, we're just showing you a glimpse of them on the screen, but know that like if you want to see the full document and dive into the details, we have them and we can provide them. And we're sharing that with the people participating remotely. And Coordinator Nugent, thank you for your work here, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. What we are trying to do here is to give you had asked for some background as to what the properties were that we owned, why we own them, various questions along those lines. So what I wanted to do was to put something together where I could discuss that and give you an opportunity to look at it. If you have questions during the course of the presentation, please feel free to signal to the mayor and let her know that you have a question. You don't need to hold it toward the end.
Yes, thank you for reminding them. That's for council. If you guys want to, this is also, as he's presenting, this is also time for you to weigh in. And ask your question.
Basically, the questions that we were looking at is what property do we now own as the town, and how do these properties reflect in our long-term vision, and how can we leverage them for financial sustainability and community benefit? The basic things that we have at this point is, of course, Town Hall, which is at 4176 Benton. We have what we are now calling the Town Hall Annex, which is the building at 4185 Ames, as the building at 4183 has been torn down. This property was purchased in 8/23/2025. The housing partnership was the next property we bought, 4193 Ames. And this one was purchased in 8/7/2024. And the most recent purchase that we made was something that we made for a commercial opportunity. It's at 4375 Benton, and it was purchased in July of this year. These four properties were all serve a different purpose in what we're doing right now. And we'll try to give you a little bit of an idea of what that is. We're going to start with of course, Town Hall, 4176 Benton Street. Prior to 2020, the property looked like this. You'll notice basically that it's in the center of the Town Hall Park area. Go ahead to the next one. During Mayor Levy's administration, we purchased the little cutout portion that you'll see there. That was as we were getting ready to try and expand that building and make that into something more.
When you hear us talk about something called a notch, we're referring to that because we notched out an additional little piece.
This just kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of the area that we're talking about. It's that little L-shaped notch there on the side of Town Hall.
And previously it was owned by Open Space, as is all the other land around it. And now we own that piece where the little free library is.
If you look at this particular slide, what we're looking at here is you can see that now Town Hall encompasses that notch piece. And then on either side is Open Space and owned by Open Space. So that's that area in yellow there. One of the things that we were looking to do is we were trying to come up with a way that we could use that notch to build a two-story addition. RG and Associates, who are town engineers, worked with Mayor Libby, and they came up with a plan for that. If you go to the next slide, we've got a couple of options that are here. We're just going to kind of go past those, but just be aware that there were a couple of options that we were talking about. The main thing was they were going to build a two-story addition in that little section of what we're now calling the notch. Go ahead and move forward. And then you have an artist rendering of what it was supposed to look like. basically what we were working on at that time was they were trying to find ways to improve and add things to town hall that we currently don't have. They wanted to have a slightly larger area for the waiting area for court and or council meetings. They needed to upgrade bathrooms. They wanted more office space for the staff. We wanted to look at trying to get more ADA compliance into the building because there are some issues that we have, which we will probably be coming up with here shortly because of the ADA transition plan that we're currently in the process of doing. The other big thing that we wanted was storage areas, which we are very short on. And then they were just throwing it out that there would be other possibilities with using that space.
I think partly why I put possibly other things as well, just to be completely frank, is that because that was a prior administrative effort, or administration's effort, I wasn't entirely clear on what the problems were that he was trying to address with RG and Associates plans. It wasn't well documented. So when I looked at those drawings, I could see that there were some things that they were trying to do, but I couldn't clearly understand like what the problems were that they were trying to solve, other than a few things that we listed there.
And so basically, as she's saying, when Mayor Mitchum took over, the thing that we were looking at that point was that we were trying to understand what they thought we needed to have for the town in order to have more, better use of our town hall facility. And we were looking at whether prior administration's solutions would actually work for it. As we went forward, they were trying to decide on that, whether that was going to suffice. We actually went in February of 2022 and had a architectural firm put together a plan for this. The next couple of drawings are going to be part of that plan. You'll see that there's a picture of the current town hall as it sits right now. They basically gave us a lot of information. One of the things that you need to be aware of, though, is that as we are looking at the facility, some of the things that we were talking about needing, the storage, is like a critical thing because there are various storage needs that are needed. We need storage for the town clerk. We need storage for the court clerk. We need storage for evidence for the PD, and we need storage for PD and of course for Public Works. Of those right now, the only one that really has a lot of storage on site is Public Works in that garage. The rest of them don't have any storage. And the problem being that we can't just have a large single storage area. All of this has to be stored in separate locked rooms with proper security. So that's one of the big things. The other thing that we came up with issues that are there is that the police needed more office space. They need a holding cell so that we can have a place to put somebody for even a short while until they can get them to.
The members of the public to be quiet, please. Thank you.
They needed a holding cell so they have a place to put people for a short period until they can get them to jail. We do have a locker room and a changing area, but we don't have any showers for PD, which would be something that would be really nice for them to have. Basically, the problem that we ran into through all of this when Coke looked at this and started putting together their things is that there are limitations because of the open space land use rules. And we can't use any of that space on either side of town hall, to the extent that if you look at town hall and you say, well, why don't we just pop the top and go up? The problem is that we did some work and found out that the foundations were not sufficient to go to a second story. The only building there that has that potential even would be the garage, but we technically don't own the garage ourselves. That is an open space facility. So we don't really have a place that we can go up. If we try to go up, you have to put additional supports into the walls. And in doing that, since we can't even go out a couple of inches into the open space on either side, all of that extra would have to come inside, which then reduces the amount of space that you have inside. So that's kind of the problem that we ran into. They have, again, a bunch of options here. We can just.
Can I talk to one other thing there? It jogged my memory. When we were investigating what are the true programmatic needs of the town with Koch Architects' help as they were interviewing staff, one of the really key examples that they gave that hit home for me is the police department entrance. So when the police department was interviewed, they spoke to like what it's like for them when they had a experience where they had a female in custody. And what they do with a female in custody is they have to go down an alley, down a dark alley with police officers, and they get walked through what looks like a garage area into a back door. And it doesn't say town hall. It doesn't say, like, it just is not what we want our police department to be doing as we're improving our reputation and our services and supporting them and trying to provide really good services to the community. So I thought that was a really good example of a way in which the improvement was just so, easy to visualize how we could make some improvements. Thank you.
Basically what it came to is, in the end, after looking at all of the options that they had, and there are options there. If you would like to see them again, please ask for this particular paper, and we'll be glad to share with you. For the brevity, we didn't really want to spend a lot of time going through each of their options. What it came down to in the end was that with the site limitations that we have because of the setbacks and the open space use, we really couldn't use this property at 4176 and either go up or go out. There's just not a way to utilize that facility in that way. So that was basically the conclusion of the Koch thing. The next thing I had was I was just running through a couple of things, realizing that we couldn't actually change the property overall. We did do some things to try and enhance what we are using. Through May through August of 2022, we did some interior renovations. That was when we added some office space. We added the bathrooms and some break room space. Still left us where we don't have the storage facilities. We don't have the shower facilities for PD. We don't really have, by taking the extra office space and putting it in there, we actually reduced the amount of space that was available for town council meetings and also for court. Court is another big one that we haven't really talked about too much, but in the Koch thing, they talked with the court people, and basically there was a need for a judge's chambers, which we do not have right now. They needed an office for the prosecuting attorney to use, and we don't really have that. They just have to sit out at a desk and do that.
We actually almost lost that contract because of that.
Yeah, it is a big problem. Court is one of those things that we haven't really spent a lot of time talking about, but we really do need to come up with a way to more efficiently handle court. At this point, when court is in session, basically everybody else has to kind of stay out of town hall. You can't get in there because it's just so crowded and there's so much going on. Next thing that we added is in August of 23, we added the police carports. That was to protect the vehicles so that in the case of hailstorms, we wouldn't suffer a major loss like we had a few years earlier. In December of 2023, we moved the main electrical panel from inside to outside. This was because it was in a place where it was not accessible, and it was causing us to have some issues with our insurance company, Sursa. And so we moved it to where it is not blocked anymore and is easily accessible. Through 2023 and 2024, we were working on security upgrades, which we finally finished in February of 2024. In August of 2023, we became aware of the fact that there was an adjacent property that could help us provide eventual options to our long-term solution. This property, of course, is at 4183 and 4185 Ames Street. At the time that we were looking at this, it was, as everyone will remember, an eyesore. It was in the process of being worked on and had been worked on for years. There was a problem with the foundation, which caused them to stop working on it for quite a while, and it ended up being sold. When we found out that it had just been sold, it just so happened that we were able to get in, talk to the new owner, and convince him to sell it to us. The
And
reason,
call, he didn't make a profit at all. He sold it
No.
to us for what he bought it.
yeah, he basically sold it. It was just a turnover because he thought that we had a vision for what we could use it for. It was a nuisance, and initially we were just thinking we wanted to tear it down. There was some talk of potentially using it as a property to swap with open space so that we could get that property that is now the town park and use that to expand into. And then they could have this property over at 4185. That didn't happen, and we'll get into that in a minute. Because we actually ended up having a discussion with open space at one point and found out that that was not something we were going to be able to do. They were not at all interested in swapping out the properties. And so it was a useless project at that point.
What I recall during these days is that we were having public meetings about this and reporting on it regularly. Do council members who were present at the table remember that?
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
don't remember why they were very reticent to do a swap though. I just remember
Oh, I
they were
do.
not gonna be buying that.
I can summarize quickly. They have a voter mandate to pursue open space. They do not care about municipal services and town halls. They care about open space. So they are not going to guarantee a swap until we provide the park. We would have had to completely develop the new park, and then they might have a conversation with us if the new park was better than the old park, but they wouldn't guarantee it. And they said, please, don't count on it. So it was they were very, very frank with us. And I remember being appreciative that they didn't, lead us around.
Do you think there's been any movement? I mean, there's always turnover at agencies and whatnot. I wonder if it's worth like a follow-on conversation, although
They were really, really, really clear. They were very clear that they had felt like they had they had accommodated Mountain View beyond what they thought was reasonable by selling us the notch. That had been a huge move for them, and they had worked extensively with Mayor Levy to do that, and it was a massive move for them. That was a hard thing. And they encouraged us to look at other options. They said that their goal is to provide open space, period. And they have a voter mandate to do that.
So this slide is just showing what the new property footprint looks like, showing Town Hall in the front and 4185, 4183 to the back. I have a timeline here. We purchased the property in August of 23. As you may recall, those of you who were on town council at that time, the resolution in September of 23 was made to demolish both 4183 and 4185 and get rid of those.
183 was the smaller property, was like the little garage in the back, that
The
structure. in the
carriage
back.
house in the back, yes.
And then 4185 is the house that
The
exists.
large house in the front. In order to do that, we started moving forward in October. As you see, we did an asbestos inspection of both properties. It was in November that we actually had the meeting with Open Space. And that was when we found out that we were not going to be able to swap the property with them. Up till that time, our thought had been that we would demolish the properties and then we would move forward with the swap with Open Space if that was something they were amenable to. As we move forward, then knowing that we were not going to be able to do that, we went ahead and did a asbestos remediation of both property or both structures in November. It was only actually a year later, basically in October of 24, that we came to a realization that there was not a real good need to tear down both of the properties, that the one at 4185 might be usable as a storage facility in the basement and then a town meeting hall on the upstairs. And so it was at that point that we started to look at that as a possibility. We went to council and got direction from them in that same month to look at the renovation of 4185. We went ahead in November of 24 and took out the smaller property in the back, the carriage house at 4183. And we were looking at trying to move forward with the bigger property. At that point, one of the things that I was concerned about was that before we ever looked at buying this property, we were aware that there was a problem with the foundation and that it didn't pass a safe built inspection for a permit. So I was working in that interim time between trying to figure out, is this property usable? Was the foundation usable? Was there a way that we could get this so that it would pass an inspection and be something we could use? So I've been working on that since basically October of 24. The council at the budgeting in November of 24 directed that we needed to cut back our efforts on that property and that we needed to limit ourselves to only $10,000. As you may recall at that time, what I had proposed was that with that $10,000, we might be able to figure out the foundation issues and make sure that this property would be something we could utilize. That was what we've been working on ever since. And we haven't really gone very far because we only had the $10,000 and that was not a lot to work with. More recently, after the council asked and said, why isn't anything happening with this? We went ahead and did a concept presentation of what we thought might be useful on that property. And that was when we gave you those 3 different options that we were looking at a month or so ago. And so that is kind of where we are on that. Now we're moving on to the next one. In the 4193 Ames Street, the one on the corner, what you may not remember, or maybe you do, is that in August of 24, we were looking at the idea of opting into Proposition 123, which is basically a statewide regional thing to improve affordable and attainable housing availability. And it provides incentives to local governments who do earmark or set aside properties. So we were looking at this not as a place that we could just buy and make a ton of money on. What we were looking at was to come up with a property that would be a low income housing property. We purchased this property and it was in that month in August of 24. And basically what we were trying to do is follow up with the not only the Proposition 123, but also the comp plan, as you see a quote
That's
from.
actually from the resolution to opt into Prop 123.
So what we're looking to do is to try and come up with a way that we could have a low income housing property. So that was kind of the thought in looking at that. As you can see, it is right next to the 4185 Ames property. So that gives us another thought that we could use at some point.
And the property owners came to us when they realized that we purchased the property right beside them. They approached the town. We didn't approach them.
So the property was looked at and we purchased it with a couple of goals in mind. The first and most immediate goal was that we could use it to provide low income housing to try and help us to get into that Proposition 123. The other thing that we were looking at is by having 2 properties right next to each other, that was going to make it so that down the road, if we looked at it, we might be able to utilize both of those properties to come up with something that would be larger and be a town hall complex using both.
What I remember about that negotiation as well was that we agreed to have an independent appraiser do the appraisal for the value of that property. And both parties agreed to just pay that amount. So there wasn't there wasn't like a negotiation where we were like, it's worth this much and it's worth that much. We just had an independent appraisal and it was done.
And the other thing is it never actually hit the market.
Right.
To the open market. They approached us and said, hey, we know you bought this property next door. Would you be interested in ours? At the time, we thought that that would be a way that we could save some money and get that property. And then, like I said, for the short term, low income housing down the road, if council decides, we might be able to use both properties and build something bigger.
Frankly, one of the ideas in the back of my mind was using that house as administrative offices. Like I thought it was kind of a cute idea to have administrative offices for a small town in a little Victorian house. I think Morrison does that. So I liked the way that it opened up our options. And all of that was also done in an open meeting.
And we did do a lot of, just so to cover that one, we did talk a lot about how we could use it if we decided we wanted to use it. We were looking at using the garage as a storage area that we could divvy up into three different storerooms so that each of our storage needs could be met by using that property. But it just seemed like there was way too much expense involved, and council seemed to be more interested in the low income housing options. So that was kind of where we ended up going to. The other thing that you need to keep in mind is that this reflected our comp plan. The goal was to support attainable housing and join regional partners in the effort to provide and improve affordable housing. And that was kind of where we were going with this. So that property was bought primarily with that use, and that was what it's been used for. Timeline on this is that we had the open meeting back in July of 24 to discuss the purchase. Purchase was made in August of 24, and we signed the intergovernmental agreement with Foothills Housing in April. And as far as I know, they're in the process of getting it rented at this point. I've talked to somebody just the other day who was over there prepping some of the stuff and don't know exactly when they'll get it rented, but it should be any day now.
And if council recalls that on some level, although it's not a huge revenue source, it is another way to diversify our revenue income by having rental property. Councilmember Debner, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to, make it known to council and the public that you can actually go on their website and see the houses that they have available. So we could just stay tuned and monitor that, because I imagine it'll pop up soon.
Yeah, he told me the other day when I talked to the guy that he thought it was going to be any day now. So the last property that we need to talk about is 4375 Benton Street. And again, this one we were looking at as a potential for commercial development and a long-term revenue diversification. This property was purchased with the immediate goal of we wanted to get it off the market. It's a very interesting property, and as it is currently a R2 zone, somebody could have bought this and put a really huge house on this property.
Because it's about twice the size of a normal Mountain View lot.
So the initial thought was we get it off the market, we get it to where nobody can go in there and put a large house on it.
Primarily because, I'm sorry to interrupt, primarily because at that time we were hearing from residents that they didn't want any more large houses, and we were having a big, important conversation about that. And so we really didn't want that to happen. We knew it was that the property owner was looking to sell it. And he came to us, he was sympathetic to the town's goals. And he came to us again, this property owner approached us and started that negotiation.
And again, the long-term goal is that we were looking at it, and as council had discussed during their meeting when they were discussing this property, the possibility was to rezone it. In order to get a rezoning, somebody has to actually request that. If somebody had come in and bought it as a residential property, they're probably not going to come and ask to have it rezoned. They're just going to go ahead and throw a big house on there. And it probably could have gotten 2 big houses on there for as big as that property is. So the long-term goal is to rezone it, make it commercial or mixed use, and then hopefully we can attract someone, a developer, to come in and put something on there that will add to our revenue stream for sales tax and or other taxes that are coming through. Just a reminder, back in November of 24, the council had a presentation from the Downtown Colorado Inc. DTC. And what this was all about was the commercial revitalization of town. They were looking at primarily the stretch along 44th, as well as that small stretch along Sheridan there. This property is in a unique position because it is actually just off of 44th Avenue. And so it is right next to and abuts all of the other commercial properties, which makes it a very interesting place to have it. This presentation was in November of 24. There was an open meeting to discuss the purchase a couple of months ago, and then we just closed on the property in July. So now that is ours. If you look at this picture, you'll see how close it is to 44th Avenue and to the commercial zoned areas. You'll see it is just right off of it, which makes it a perfect place to rezone it into commercial also. If you look at this picture, you'll see that it is basically double the size of most lots in Mountain View, which again was part of why we were concerned that if it had gone residential, you could have ended up with two huge houses on that property. All of these things that we've done align with the council's goals and with the comp plan. Everything that we're trying to do is to meet these things that council has said they value and that they think are important. And the comp plan, which is telling us what not only council, but what the community has said they thought was important and needed to be done. By buying these properties, we are helping to support staff and town services. We're trying to come up with a way to give more space to the staff. Quite frankly, at this point, I don't even have an office. I work half the time out of my truck because I've got no place to sit and work some of the time, especially when there's things going on in town hall.
You not only don't have an office, you don't have a desk.
Yeah. This all works to enhance our infrastructure. If we can provide stuff that helps with safety and the distinctiveness of our town, this is all for our benefit. The town staff really could use some additional stuff. Just the storage alone is such a huge problem. Right now, we're renting storage units across the street, and it just isn't very convenient and it doesn't work very well. The other thing that we're trying to do is by doing some of these things, we're trying to help with the financial aspect of the town. 4385 is going to be hopefully something that will long-term give us some tax revenues. Because it's a larger property, there are a lot of things that could go in there. It's just a question of having council look at it and say, this is what we think we need to rezone it as, this is what we're working toward. And it all comes down to you. The other thing that we're looking at is if we can get a larger town hall annex or a larger town hall, that's going to help with the community as far as moving forward, having places to do town functions, regardless of what the weather is doing. It'll give us more space for some of that stuff, which will be of value to the community. We'll have a place for court. We'll have a place for town council meetings. All of this is important. And it all works on what the comp plan has told us you all wanted to look at. So the key takeaways is that each of these properties was purchased with a reason. It was a clear strategic purpose. Every decision was made transparently in open meetings. It's not like any of this stuff was done in a backdoor deal. These properties are all long-term investments. People need to understand that just because we took money out of an account and bought a property with it, it doesn't mean that that money just went away. That property is still worth something. And down the road, we can sell it if we need to, or do whatever we need to do with it. But that money is still there. It hasn't disappeared from us.
I think on that point, it's important to note that the town's overall financial standing didn't change.
It's just those funds went from your cash in hand line item now to your capital outlay. Right? So your overall financial situation still has that dollar value. It just got moved to a different line item in your capital
Thank you.
investments.
Over the next 5 to 7 years, you can go to the next one. What we're looking for is we've been trying to build a foundation for future growth and for service improvements. That is what the whole purchase of all of these properties has been looking at. We've studied all of these challenges, and what we're trying to do is to find a way to move forward. And what we're asking council at this point is to shift from trying to look at what all the problems are, and let's try to move toward looking at what solutions you want to do and where you want to move with these properties going forward. The choices that we make today will shape Mountain View's ability to serve the residents, sustain revenues, and help us to remain a vibrant, thriving community. So the key questions for council at the end of this is, do we want to move forward with the 4185 and try and work that as a town hall annex? Do we want to engage with DCI on looking at opportunities for the commercial property that we think could go in at 4385 and working on our overall commercial zone and trying to enhance that? And basically, we're calling for a move from studying all of these issues to an action and trying to come up with something that will long-term sustain and help the town. So that's basically where we're at. What steps are we ready to direct the staff and mayor to take to move this forward?
Thank you, Coordinator Nugent. That was a really helpful presentation and well presented to